Our next speaker is named M. Stanton Evans, and he is one of the great long-time leaders of the conservative movement. He's been with us from the beginning, and he still keeps going. He's worked as an editor, journalist, television and radio commentator, and he founded the National Journalism Center. M. Stanton Evans served as chairman of the American Conservative Union from 1971 to 77. He has a new book out called Blacklisted by History, The Untold Story of Senator Joe McCarthy and His Fight Against America's Enemies. You know, turning a proper name into a verb is a sign of historical significance, but the verb to McCarthy, I think, as Mr. Evans is going to tell us, is historically inaccurate. Mr. Evans?
Thank you very much. It is a great honor to be here with you folks and with Phyllis. We go back a few years, Goldwater days and even before. And it's been a long road and in many ways a bumpy one, but one that has been well worth traveling. And I'm glad to be here with Phyllis and you today. As the intro suggests, I've been around a while anyway, and I know we want time for Q&A, right?
Yes, we do. 15 minutes and then 15 minutes of questions.
I'll try to do it.
Get it right in there. So
are there mics, or did you speak from where you are when you question?
Yeah, we have mics.
Okay. I say that because I'm a little bit hard of hearing, a little deaf. When you get older, there are two bad things that happen to you. One is your hearing starts to go, and I forget what the other one is, but I'll probably think of it in a minute. I want to commend you guys for being here. You have heard, I don't know if you know this is an all-star team that has spoken to you at this conference. These are the very best people in Congress, this lineup, without any shadow of a doubt. And what you heard is going to, I hope, help you in your own thinking and in your own careers after you leave here. I commend you for being here and putting in these hours on these serious matters. And I'm always I teach still in a college, and I always tell my students that there is more to life than keeping up with the Kardashians. But that's not keeping up with them is not easy. I mean, it takes a lot of study to know what they're doing. I saw Kim Kardashian had condemned the Zimmerman verdict, and she, would know about that. Her father was an attorney for O.J. Simpson. That's true. That's correct. And then I remember that, do you guys know, do you follow Katy Perry? Is she still popular? Katy Perry said a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, that it was an outrage that health care in America is not free. And I asked my students, I said, are Katy Perry concerts free? Well, they're not. My friend of mine, the dean of the business school, checked at that time. A ticket to a Katy Perry concert cost $83. And I said, that's an outrage. Why should I not be able to go to a Katy Perry concert for nothing? Well, not that I would go to a Katy Perry concert, but just the principle of it. So anyway, I am a bit of a contrarian in many ways. For example, the only time that I text is when I'm driving. That's actually, people know me like Phyllis knows I don't even know how to text anyway. So but it's the principle of that too. So I'm looking at some. You mentioned the McCarthy book, but I have a new book out called Stalin's Secret Agents. That's the new book, and they're both kind of about the same thing. So there's nothing wrong with lumping them together a bit. They are about a period of American history that is very frequently, in fact, almost always, misrepresented in the history books that you may have read in college or in high school. And I've tried to look at the McCarthy era, Joe McCarthy. How many of you ever heard of Senator McCarthy, McCarthyism? Okay. How many have ever heard anything good about Senator McCarthy? I see no hands. That's typical, and that's not your fault. It's the fault of my generation for not getting the truth out there. The new book is about other aspects of that era, the so-called Cold War. Now, from your standpoint, this might as well be the War of 1812 or something. It's a long time ago. But it's important to know this history for a couple of reasons, to know it correctly. One is just to know the truth is important for its own sake, but also because some of the things that happened back then and the way they are treated today are relevant to more recent events. And I think we need to know the history to begin with, just to know it, but also to apply it to the present. And one of the things that a friend of mine told me, I did not see this myself, back in 1994, was the 50th anniversary of D-Day. You guys all heard about D-Day, the landing at Normandy when the American troops went ashore in France. That's called D-Day. It's in 1944. And this was being commemorated on television in 1994, the 50th anniversary. My friend saw this. And it was on a TV station in Peoria, Illinois, or wherever it was. And the young lady reading the teleprompter referred, talking about these events, to World War XI. And which suggested to me that maybe we're not teaching history very well, but also that we're not teaching Latin. Although you would think that after all these Super Bowls, we would know something about Roman numerals, but apparently not. Anyway, so what I've tried to do in these two books is to look at what actually happened as opposed to what's in most of the textbooks that are out there. And one reason that this was possible is that the truth about all this stuff for years was covered up, and to some degree it still is. However, with the passage of time, we have had access to the files of the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who were tracking the bad guys who were trying to do us harm back in the 40s and 50s. This was all covered up at the time, and to some extent still is, but now we have a pretty good picture of what went on. And to capsule it very briefly, because the time is limited, essentially what was going on. How many of you ever seen these Bourne Supremacy movies? You ever seen these things? Matt Damon and or James Bond movies of that type, where there's always some bad guy that's trying to, or a group of bad guys trying to take over the world, and Matt Damon stops them. Well, back then, unfortunately, we did not have Matt Damon back in the 40s and 50s, which might have been a blessing. I don't know. But anyway, and that's another story. And we had plenty of bad guys, however, who were trying to take over the world, just like in the movies, except it was real. And the main people standing in their way of taking over the world were Americans. We were the problem from their standpoint. And so what they did, these people were called communists, and they were agents of the Soviet Union, which had a game plan of conquering country after country after country. We were the big barrier to their success. So that the bad guys were trying to influence what we did, and they infiltrated our government to do this and to affect our policy to serve the cause of Moscow. And that's what these books are about. They go into these records that are now available from the FBI and elsewhere, showing what really happened, things that were not available 50 years ago. There, it turns out, were hundreds of these agents in the U.S. government who were, some of them were very famous. One was named Alger Hiss, who was convicted finally and sent to prison, Soviet agent, but there were many, many more like him.